Hey guys, what's up? This is Paul. Just wondering if Char was over there. I haven't seen her all day. I took the kids out.
A wife and mother vanishes from her home, and it's the husband, right? Or was it? Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Charlotte Polus. Viewer discretion is advised. Charlotte Polus was born on July 4th, 1965. She was born into a very large family. She would actually be the oldest of 6 total kids. Her and her family were incredibly close-knit. They were all best friends, basically. And because of her upbringing, she just sort of became a very caring, loving, well-natured person. Charlotte loved to bake and do crafts. She was very creative. The most important part of her entire life were her 2 kids. Charlotte had met a man named Paul Pollis in 1985 through a friend. The 2 of them quickly hit it off, and they would eventually start dating, which would lead to marriage. Then through that, they ended up having 2 kids together. They had a daughter named Layla and a son named Aiden. Both of them were still very young at the time this case actually occurs. Charlotte's family wasn't exactly pleased as punch with Paul. They weren't really big fans of him because in the beginning of their relationship, Paul tended to be really demanding, very controlling, not really abusive or anything like that, at least not that anyone knew, but he was just a very jealous, controlling person. But they never really looked at him or saw him necessarily as a violent type. And so when this all happened in 1994, everyone was just sort of shocked. Could he have done something to Charlotte? Well, that to this day is still up for debate. It was March 11th, 1994, and Charlotte and her husband, Paul, and their 2 kids were living in a house in Girard, Ohio. On that March 11th day in 1994, Charlotte was feeling very, very under the weather. She was ill. It got to a point where she would end up going to an urgent care that night. Paul would take her. Paul's parents would come to the house to babysit the 2 kids while he took her to the doctor. She did, in fact, go to the doctor where she was diagnosed with an inner ear infection. This would later be confirmed. They could say for certainty that she was at that hospital, and they did diagnose her with this illness. They gave her some medicine, and they sent her home after a few hours. They got home, and Paul would say, goodbye to his parents, and his parents would leave the house. Charlotte then picks up the phone to call her mom, and they have a pretty short conversation. And what Charlotte's mom doesn't realize is this is the last time she's ever going to hear from her daughter ever again. The phone call that they had was at about 1:30 in the morning. And this is also the last time anyone will ever report seeing Charlotte or hearing from Charlotte ever again. At least people that aren't suspects. At about 8:30 or 9 o'clock the following morning, Charlotte's mom tries to call and speak to Charlotte, but Paul picks up and says she's still feeling a little unwell. She's in bed, asleep. He told her, listen, I'll let Charlotte know when she wakes up and she'll give you a call. Hours go by and she doesn't get a phone call from Charlotte, so she calls back. But this time nobody answers. She calls back again. Nobody answers. Again. Nobody answers. Again. Nobody answers. Not even Paul. Charlotte and her mom spoke on the phone many, many times throughout the day, every day. So this was something extremely unusual. Even if she was sick, she would still be able to talk to her. It got to a point where at one point that afternoon, Charlotte's aunt would go to Charlotte's house, knock on the door to see if she could maybe just directly speak to Charlotte, but nobody answered. The house appeared to be empty. At approximately 7:30 p.m. that night, Paul calls Charlotte's parents, I guess, and leaves a voicemail on their answering machine, and this is part of that message.
Hey guys, what's up? This is Paul. Just wondering if Char was over there. I haven't seen her all day. I took the kids out, and I just wondered if maybe she was with you guys or if she called you or something, man. Let me know. I'm sort of getting a little freaked out here.
Paul can't find Charlotte. She seems to be missing. What he says occurred that day was now on March 12th, 1994. He woke up. Charlotte was sick. She was still in bed. Paul had some errands to run, so he gave the kids breakfast. He then loaded the kids into his car, and they went about their day doing several different errands. He says he was out of the house between 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. that day, and that they had gone to several places, including they went to get a burger at a restaurant. They went to go look at houses to buy for a couple of hours. The immediate issue that Charlotte's mom had with this story was that she had called the house, at 9 o'clock, 9:30, 10 o'clock, 10:30, during a time when Paul himself has now alibied himself as that he was in the house. He didn't answer the phone. So she's wondering, okay, well, how come you didn't answer the phone if you were there? Didn't really have a good answer for that. But he says when he got home a little after 4 p.m. that day, that's when he noticed that Charlotte was gone. He said he didn't think anything of it because, maybe she started to feel better. Maybe she went outside for a walk to get some fresh air. She couldn't have gone anywhere in their vehicle because Paul had their vehicle, and that's the only car they had. After an hour or two of him kind of just sort of being at the house, he realizes he sees Charlotte's purse just sitting on a countertop, and the medicine that she had gotten for, her ear infection was all in the house still. She wouldn't go anywhere without her purse. She never did. And when Paul calls and leaves a message for Charlotte's family at 7:30 p.m., this is reportedly just 3 hours after he arrives home and realizes she's not there. They thought it was weird that he would, of all people, would just suddenly assume she was missing and endangered after just a few hours of not seeing her. Because when he called, he seemed a little inebriated, maybe a little antsy. So Charlotte's parents drive out to the house. And when they get there, they notice that Paul's parents are there at the house. Their car's in the driveway. And actually a neighbor comes up to Charlotte's parents and says, actually, their car has been here all night. It was in the driveway last night all the way up until this morning, until now. And when they walked into the house, Charlotte's parents, they noticed strong odor of cleaning supplies. Everything seemed totally cleaned, like it was spick and span. Everything was just freshly cleaned. Paul was not known to be much of a cleaner, and that's usually something Charlotte did. And so they thought that was strange, especially that his parents were there literally assisting him clean the house. Paul's dad at that time was actually the county coroner for Trumbull County there in Ohio. And basically he advised his son, don't say anything to her parents. Or he almost seemed to be kind of instructing Paul what to say and how to respond to them. But as the family is there looking around the house, as Paul's family is cleaning, Charlotte's sister is also there at the house, and she walks outside and she sees, because I guess it was snowing at the time, and she sees footprints, shoe impressions in the snow leading from the back porch to this white shed that they had on their backyard. And she goes up to it and she sees it's padlocked. And she's kind of trying to pull it to see if she can open it or maybe peek in. But then Paul runs out in a huff and says, what are you doing? You don't need to be in there. And she goes, well, what is in there? I mean, the door appears to be bulging. It almost seemed like it was pushed out a little bit. He goes, nothing. It's just tools and stuff that you would have in a shed. You don't need to look in there. They said, well, can you just give us a key just so we can check, so we can clear our minds with this? He says, no. The following day, I think it was Charlotte's brother goes back with an axe and he cuts the padlock off and he opens up the door. It's empty. There's nothing in there. It was clearly something had been moved out of it overnight. So the police finally are involved. They're there by the day after she is officially noticed missing. And Paul's dad really is just there by Paul's side, basically directing everything for him to say and how to respond. Charlotte's family is now incredibly suspicious, obviously, of Paul and Paul's parents of being involved in something that happened to Charlotte. So the thing is that Charlotte was actually, in terms of weight, she was about twice Paul's size. She was about 5'3", 5'4", but weighed somewhere around 300 pounds. Paul was this very kind of thin, 125, 130 pound guy. There was just no way he would have been able to move Charlotte all on his own. And so there is belief that perhaps Paul's father, allegedly, might have helped move her, and that the mom helped clean up after the fact. They just don't know if Paul's parents were there when something happened, or did they find out after the fact and just helped their son? Or was it all just crazy coincidence and Paul had nothing to do with it? But police asked for Paul's whereabouts during the time frame that, Charlotte would have last been seen at the house. So he says, I went to this place, this place, this place, and police go to each place, and nobody can recall seeing Paul at any of those locations. Paul had gone to the laundromat the day after Charlotte was reported missing, and it was actually someone, I think, in Charlotte's family worked at that laundromat and noticed that he brought in something with what looked like a large red stain on it. Paul himself put this item, I think it was a comforter, in the washing machine, and he strictly said to the people who worked there, do not do anything with this. Don't take it out. I will take it out. Another thing contradicting what Paul said was his alibi was the fact that he said the kids were with him in the car when he went through all these errands. However, a neighbor would come forward to state that she was pulling out of her driveway and driving down the street when she saw Paul's vehicle backed into or up to the front door of the house, and that he was loading boxes and all sorts of crap into the car. When the neighbor looked in the car, she saw just boxes everywhere, and there were no kids in sight. Even if he had the kids, there was no way he was going to put the kids in the car. There was no room for them. And he kind of, as she drove by, he gave her this really kind of dirty look. And when Paul's asked about this, he goes, I don't know what to tell you. My kids were with me. I don't abandon my kids. I wouldn't abandon them in a car. I wouldn't abandon them at the house. They were with me. The problem is the kids were so young that they really couldn't offer any assistance. Police did get a warrant to search Paul's vehicle, and when they opened the trunk, they sprayed it with luminol, and the carpeting of the trunk did light up a little bit, which could be potentially indicative of bloodstains. However, luminol doesn't only show bloodstains. And the samples in the car was just far too small to get any kind of sample from. However, it was enough to tell, family Charlotte's body was in that trunk at some point. When police tried to question Paul's parents, and when confronted about, well, how come your car was seen here not only just all night, but into the morning, like your car never left after, Charlotte and Paul reportedly came home from the doctor. You said you left, but neighbors are saying you never left. And she said, that's positively ridiculous. That would never happen. I did not do that. I did not help my son clean up any crime scene. But they seemed kind of suspicious as well. Paul agreed to take a polygraph test. He even scheduled a time to go in to take that polygraph test. However, he didn't show up for it. Now, that does not necessarily mean anything. Polygraph tests, you cannot use them in court, and they are a lot of times wrong. They're not an accurate representation of a person's innocence or guilt. But police did feel that Paul was not telling the truth, that he was lying. There was obstructing justice here. And so they actually would end up arresting him and charging him with obstruction of justice. However, those charges were soon thrown out by a judge. They just didn't have enough evidence to make it stick. Ever since Charlotte disappeared, the two kids had been staying with Charlotte's parents. And the daughter, Layla, has over the course of several months to a year or so after this all happened, would start speaking and start saying things like, I'm afraid of trash bags. She was terrified of black trash bags because I saw mommy go into a black trash bag. She at one point said, Daddy hurt mommy and put her in a trash bag. Paul and his parents were like, well, kids can be easily manipulated. They could be coached into saying these types of things. But kids also tell the truth especially if it's unprovoked. It's just a matter of how did that information come out? That's the big question. Paul has maintained that he did absolutely nothing to Charlotte. He did not kill her. He had nothing to do with her disappearance. But he also has a really sketchy alibi that does not hold up. He was seen loading his car up with crap and not his kids. His parents were there cleaning the house before Charlotte's even officially reported missing. His parents, they claimed left the house the night before, but people said they didn't. Paul wouldn't let anyone go into that shed, and that was baffling because it's like, if there's nothing in there, then show us. But he was very adamant and very angry about showing them what's in the shed, and when he finally got access to the shed, everything in it was gone. Everything about this screams he did something to her. Again, Paul was always a very controlling and manipulative person. Charlotte's family would suggest that Paul had been unfaithful to Charlotte on a number of occasions. Her family, when searching through the house, found in a bedside table some paperwork that indicated that Charlotte was actually planning on filing for a divorce. And that right there could have been motive for him. He didn't want her to leave. He wanted to control her, and when she's gonna try to get out of his control, he needed to stop her. Also, something to note is that he ended up having a yard sale selling a lot of her crap within like weeks of her being reported missing. There was also reports that Paul's parents in their garage had dug up the cement and then refilled it. And when questioned by police, the parents refused to say what they were doing with that filled-in cement hole in the garage. Paul, immediately after the disappearance, also had scratches on his arms and I think on his face, indicative that he may have gotten into some kind of fight with Charlotte and she retaliated and scratched him back. But he says, I got those scratches from a water heater. Police did take photos of those scratch marks, but somehow those photos are now gone. Charlotte's brother, Ali, had gone to the house and because he had found tiny traces of blood spatter in the house, and he took photos of them because Ali was actually working as a volunteer for the Turnbull Sheriff's Department, I believe at the time. He gave those photos to police, which now conveniently are gone. Meanwhile, they're out there searching for Charlotte, seeing if they can find her anywhere. They have foot searches being done. They've got, put helicopters in the air. They've searched under every nook and cranny. They looked in all the bodies of water. They brought in cadaver dogs, but they've had no luck finding Charlotte anywhere. No trace of her has ever been found. She's just gone. Years go by, Paul ends up remarrying. He married a woman named Deborah. In 2005, he was arrested for domestic violence against Deborah. He had slammed a door on her. He threatened to beat her and to harm her even further, and he was sentenced to 5 years probation for it. In 2006, he and Deborah were also charged, because she was doing some illegal deeds with him. They were charged with money laundering. They had embezzled $1.6 million from a dialysis clinic that they had worked at. In March of 2007, Paul is charged with failing to obey a police officer. He basically has this laundry list of like little crimes here and there ever since Charlotte's disappearance. But where is Charlotte? That question has never been answered. They've never come close to finding her. They've never come close to finding out exactly what happened to her. They still have no idea what the truth is. It sure sounds like Paul had some involvement and his parents helped. However, it doesn't mean that they did. But who else would have done it? Who else had the motive? Who else had the opportunity to do this? Only one person really checks out. Nobody saw Charlotte leave that house. There were people in the neighborhood. There were witnesses. Nobody saw her. Really only one way you could think that she would leave that house is if she was dead. Charlotte's parents think that he just flew into a rage one night. They probably argued that night. Something happened where he beat her, hit her, something that caused her to die. And he got his parents involved with helping to cover it up. Sucks. I mean, and I wish they had evidence, but they just don't. They don't have any evidence to bring charges forward. And they need something. I mean, they need Charlotte first and foremost. They need her. Her family needs her. They need to lay her to rest. She's out there somewhere, and someone knows where she is. Maybe Paul has talked. Maybe his parents said something. Maybe somebody knows something. And maybe that someone is you. If you have any information on the whereabouts of Charlotte Polus, please call 330-545-0211. Please help bring Charlotte home and help her get the justice she rightfully deserves. But that is it for this case. True Crime, Aruni, Dooney, Dingleberry Dongs. As usual, if you are new here, hello, my name is Mike. I tell true crime stories here. Please subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, hit the bell so you're notified of when I post. Subscribe, all that stuff. Follow me over on TikTok. The link to my TikTok is in the link tree in the description of this video below. I tell short-form true crime stories over there. And in that link tree, you'll also find my case list. If there's a case that you do not see on my list, you want me to cover at some point, just send me a quick email. My email is below. And just send me the name of the case, where it happened, and when it happened. I'll add that name to my list, and I will cover it at some point eventually. If you're a loved one of a victim, please let me know in the email so I can make sure that case becomes a higher priority. But yeah, that is it for this video. And so until the next case, True Crime Aroonies, ta-ta for now.